reason why I wanted to do this is because I hear a lot of, especially the sprinters, getting hamstring injury as a common one in probably the universal problem. So I want to address from the scientific way, and then what kind of exercise is useful to prevent that injury.
会想要做这个议题呢，其实就是因为大腿后侧肌群受伤在一般来说非常多的青少年运动员以及甚至全球来说都会很常见到这个受伤发生，所以我们就会希望来讨论这个议题，让大家去了解我怎么样去预防说这个受伤的伤害，以及它发生之后我要怎么样去训练去尽量去恢复到原本的表现上。
Okay, so first one, I'm going to talk about the anatomy of the hamstring muscles and the injury incidence in a specific area. So there's two different kinds. The first one is more on the top part of the hamstring, which is from the semitendinosus, usually gets torn from the running. And then the second one is a little bit closer to the knee joint, which is from the biceps femoris, which is the lateral hamstring. So top part is coming from the medial hamstring, and then the bottom part coming from the lateral hamstring.
首先，我们就来讨论说，大腿后侧肌群这一块其实是由3个肌肉去组成的肌群，大腿后侧肌群的部分。所以我们现在谈到它的结果上，它容易发生受伤的情形其实是2个点。第一个的话是在我们这里可以看到比较上缘，比较接近屁股这个地方。它就是我们半腱肌，它通常的断裂会出现在这个地方，通常跑步的情形会蛮容易发生在这个时候。然后再来另外一个比较容易受伤的点是比较靠近膝盖后侧这个地方，股二头肌的撕裂会比较容易发生在这个情形。所以最常发生的2个受伤的部位就是靠近屁股的半腱肌以及靠近膝盖的股二头肌的部分。
So just like any other injuries.The reason is not just from the one factor. The reason for hamstring injury come from different factors. So, keep in mind that the top part and then the bottom part of the hamstring injury probably come from different factors.
那我们大家都知道，受伤通常都不会是单一的因素所造成的，通常都是很多因素造成。大腿的受伤也是这个情形，就是不会是单一，所以造成上方受伤的情形，造成接近半腱肌受伤的情形跟股二头肌受伤可能也是不同的情形。
Okay, so let's go to the other slide. So this one here, okay, this is one I made. It's called the angle diagram of the hip joint and the knee joint. So I know this one is very difficult for people to understand what you're actually looking at from this graphic. But basically what I'm trying to get at is I'm trying to look at consistency of the gait when people are walking or running, right? So we're trying to capture the variance of that movement.
好，那我们这边看到下一张这个 slide 的部分，它是在讲2个角度的关系。第一个是膝盖角度以及髋关节角度，这可能对大家来说好像比较难去理解这张图在做什么。它其实做的就是在走路啊，在活动，在跨步的时候。的那个髋关节角度跟膝盖角度，同时我们放到同一张图上面，左边这个图可以看到的，同时放到同一张图上面去看2个角度的变化。
So you notice that the easy one to capture this one is the bottom part. It looks very consistent. The bottom part, it looks always consistent, but the top part here, you see the line is now overlapping. That means that the gait pattern is not actually the same when you look at this kind of figure.
那我们可以看到在，这张图的下方这一段其实是非常一致的，它的重叠是非常一致的。它每一次回来的时候都是在同类似的轨迹上去走，只有在出去的时候会比较在不同的轨迹上去走，所以就是表示我们走路的时候往回的这一段其实是活动是比较一致的，在踢出去的时候是活动比较不一致的。
So this tells me that if someone look like this.The pattern to get the leg out to create the initial foot contact to the ground is always not the same. That's why it shows up like this.
所以我们从这张图就会看到，在踢出去的时候到脚踏地的这个瞬间，其实是每一次你的髋关节以及膝关节它的角度的关系就是相对是比较不一样的。
So when you look at the initial foot contact position, Okay, this is where the hamstring is at the lengthening part, the longest part. So, of course, if this position is always different, it puts a lot of stress to the hamstring.
那当然，我们在跨步出去到脚踏地的这一瞬间，其实是角度最大的，然后通常最不一致，所以就是最容易出现其他受伤的机制的情形。
Okay, so if you actually go back to the one I just mentioned, that if you have too much, okay, if the variation is present, okay, too much hip flexion and then too much knee extension, that creates a long range of motion for the leg to land on the ground and then pull back, okay, and then that's why it puts a lot of pressure on the hamstring muscle.
OK， 那我们就是在看到上面这个部分，就是在踢出去，脚跨出去要到脚跟要落地的那一瞬间，其实因为它的髋关节的角度是最大，然后以及膝关节的角度都是最大的情形，然后拉回来那一瞬间，它需要的力量力臂是比较长的，比较容易出现受伤的情形。
Okay, so one part, if you have too much leg out to land on the ground, and then have too much ground contact time to pull back, that puts a lot of pressure on the hamstring. But another way to say that is if each foot contact is very different every time, it's not consistent, and then that gets a lot of variation of the contraction rate for the hamstring muscle. That also leads to the high risk of injury.
当然，首先我们第一个是触地的时间到拉回来的那一段的时间比较长。你需要的力量就比较大，然后每一次你跨步的时候都是在不同的情形下的时候，比较不一致的时候，它就比较容易出现那个你肌肉需要每一次的收缩都会是不一样的情形，它需要的力量，它需要的角度都会不一样，就比较容易造成受伤的情形。
Okay, so let's go through. Okay, I point out 3 main parts for this. The first one is talking about actually strengthening the hamstring muscle, which is kind of common, but the question is how to strengthening those muscles.
那我们这边它的研究的层面很广，很多方面去做研究，但我们就举出里面其中3个部分去做探讨。第一个就是那个大腿后侧肌群的加强的部分，那但是我们当然想要问的是。那我们要如何去训练它？怎么去强化这个部分
？The second one they're talking about is actually stabilizing the pelvis. Okay, and then this one is actually very interesting. That when I actually train athletes, I always talk about this pelvic stability. Okay, if the pelvis is going all over the place, okay, the hamstring length changes all the time, right? So you have to stabilize the pelvis very well in order to have that same amount of force coming from hamstring.
那我们接下来第二个部分，我们刚刚说举到3个方面。第二个部分，我们想要探讨的是骨盆的稳定度。那骨盆稳定度，这个就是大家在训练中也会非常去强调的这个部分，因为你骨盆稳定度不好，它常常就会让你的大腿后侧肌群一直在伸长缩短不一样的情形去用力，就会比较容易造成其他的不舒服以及动作没有那么一致，没有那么好的活动的功用这样子。
And then the last one, I think this is very important for coaches. It's talking about the movement quality, whether it's coming from the exercise, but also from the regular practice period. The movement quality must be higher. So that puts a lot of repetition, a lot of practice time to make sure that the movement is very well. If you do the wrong movement many times, that leads to injury. So the proper mechanics of the leg movement is also a way to prevent the hamstring injury.
那最后一个部分就是会探讨到动作品质这个部分，因为我们在这动作品质其实不管是在运动本身，或是说在其他的训练上，都非常去强调这一块，因为它就是需要透过大量你的练习，必须是要透过大量的练习动作，一直反复的去做。如果你的动作品质不好，动作的质量不好，会造成一些容易受伤的情形发生的话，你做越多反而越容易受伤。所以我们在 不管是在运动上，不管是在其他训练上，都非常强调动作品质这部分。我们要求他的动作是良好的，去训练才会帮助强化到大腿后侧肌群去预防受伤的情形发生。